Okay, so welcome everyone to the July forecast, and what a month it's turning out to be already. I mean, it was always going to be this volatile, of course, and you can easily say that in hindsight. But we knew Mars was going into Cancer, opposite Saturn and Pluto, in a square to Uranus. We knew all of this, and the nodes continuing through their signs of exaltation, Rahu in Taurus and Ketu in Scorpio, activating Venus and Mars, which are together in Cancer. So we knew all this, and it was always going to be explosive. But it's always surprising still when it does turn out to be as or more explosive than you could imagine. Um, so I posted I don't know, was it yesterday? I posted the one on pandemonium, and I actually sent that out to my newsletter, which I send out a newsletter once a month to just general readers, who not people who follow me that closely. And I got like one after the other, unsubscribe, unsubscribe, unsubscribe. I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't talk about pandemonium and hell. And yeah, I know people don't want to hear bad stuff. I can understand that people don't want to hear any bad news, but like I'm just reporting on what it is, I guess. And it is pretty bad out there. I think you'd all agree with me that it is pretty bad right now. And I know a lot of astrologers tend to kind of talk in terms of staying away from good and bad, using that kind of language. But when things are bad, you have to acknowledge that they are bad. It's difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people are having a really challenging time right now. Anyway, let's get on with July and see how this is going to pan out. And that is, I purposely used the word pan there. Um, See, I'm very mercurial in a way. Mercury is my Atmakarika, my soul planet, my highest degree planet. So I am very much about communication. So and playful with it as well. I kind of like to play with words. But Pan is a very important deity, of course, in relation to everything that's happening right now. And I just wanted to remind you all of that. And the image here, of course, the sculpture here, that's of Pan teaching the pan flutes uh, to Dionysus. Basically, even though this is like, obviously, we're talking a different um, pantheon of gods here, the Greek pantheon, as opposed to the Vedic. But I've written before about how Pan ties in with Vishnu, because they basically are different traditions talking about the same thing, which is nature god, and a connection to nature and connection between everyone and consciousness. That's what Vishnu represents, but that's also what Pan represents. And at the same time, Pan has this other side to him, unlike Vishnu. And it's kind of like this scary side. I mean, he's like this goat-footed creature, half man, half beast. And his shrieks create panic. And this is where we get the words panic from, pandemonium, pandemic. And so I just wanted to remind you all that, and this image as well with, in this case, again, it's not the Vedic god, but like if we could relate this to maybe even just Venus as well, and enjoyments, and, um, that Pan is here all the time, is what I'm trying to say. That Pan is, and Saturn is in Capricorn all this time. There's no avoiding this. So even though there are times where we can enjoy ourselves more, sometimes, like this month or leading up to this period now, and easing off from here on in, thankfully, but this has reached a culmination point now where freedoms are now starting to kind of come in more. But this Saturn opposite Mars and Venus in Cancer is like this picture. Basically, we want to enjoy ourselves. We want what we want, and we want it now. That's Venus and Mars in Cancer. But we cannot because of Saturn in Capricorn. Or we can, but there's a price to pay, right? It's kind of like he's got his arm around, very kind of sinister look as well. There was another sculpture that I was trying to find, and I had years ago, and I lost it, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And it's of a similar kind of theme, and it's of and I think it's actually even Saturn. Saturn actually with a maiden, and it was actually really quite disturbing sculpture of Saturn, like an old man groping a young maiden, basically. But I just thought it was perfect for what this kind of day and age we're living in. And so basically, whatever you're wanting to enjoy, you're having to deal with the Saturn aspect, because Saturn is in Capricorn for all of this year and most of next year. So as the faster moving planets go around and around, and they change all of the things that we want, different times of the year, the different seasons, Saturn is remaining in Capricorn. So we're having this kind of season of Saturn throughout this, and like a season of Pan. And although, like I said, Pan does represent some enjoyable things, it also represents these scary things. And that's the thing always to think about with this god. So anyway, that's Pan. Let me move it forward. And let's talk a little bit about the transits that are going on right now. So right now we have, of course, Saturn, Pluto opposing Mars and Venus. Now the exact Saturn-Mars opposition has occurred already. That was on the 1st. That is starting to break up now. You might have felt the kind of ease of that somewhat, especially if you're Mars ruled, Aries ascendant or Scorpio ascendant. I know I personally have been feeling it. I'm Scorpio ascendant, so I'm ruled by Mars. Thankfully for mine, it's not as difficult, I imagine, as Aries, because Aries, Mars is in the 4th sign, whereas for Scorpio, Mars is in the 9th sign. So I went on my retreat, a riding retreat. 9th sign is perfect for that, with Saturn opposite in the 3rd. That's a very kind of a good way, if you want, again, quote unquote, good way of channeling this Saturn Mars opposition when you have it in the 3rd, 9th. It's literally about focusing on writing. So I knew that was the case. And it's not that I planned it so that, oh, Mars is in my 9th and Saturn's in my 3rd retrograde, and so I better book a retreat. That's not how it happened at all. What happens is, as always happens, that life happens. And it turns out that the very thing you need to be doing is reflecting what the planets are doing, right? So I knew that it was happening, but it was just happening. It all timed itself perfectly. And actually, I didn't have a choice in the booking of it, because I was organizing with other people, right? And my partner and everything. So I and the people who own the cottage. So it just so happened that I was on a retreat riding during a Saturn opposition to Mars. But however you've experienced it, it has been and it's gone, and it's starting to ease now. And thankfully, it will start to ease up. Now, the only thing about that then is that Mars still has to go to its exact degree of debilitation at the end of Cancer. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Pluto is kind of slipping into the background as well, even though it's still there. I mean, the fear is still there, and that's what Saturn Pluto is. If you look back at that image, it's not just Saturn, it's Saturn Pluto. So it's an even scarier kind of Pan type figure. So Venus has yet to exactly oppose Saturn. That will be on the 7th. So again, there's this kind of restriction of Venus still, and and anyway, there's so many stories. Oh my God, there's so many stories at the moment, and so much in the news feed that I could draw on. But anyway, I'm sure instead of picking out individual stories, you can just relate it to your own life experience. There's a restriction going on. There's a want and a need, a desire on the one side, and there's this restriction on the other. And there's at least having to, again, thinking about this image, at least having to play with the restriction, whether it's not like a complete and utter restriction, because like Pan has got his arm around, and teaching the flute. Like, so there's some negotiation at least. Oppositions aren't just, okay, there's no possibility here and that's it. No, there is some possibility, but you have to negotiate. So all of this, of course, is occurring in this whole period where the square to Uranus occurs, to Saturn especially, which is whole year, and at this moment to Mars. And one of the stories I thought was just amazing. Like, well, I mean, it's ongoing in Canada, where, I mean, you just couldn't make this up, with Saturn square to Uranus and also square to Mars. Literally, lightning strikes, that's Uranus, setting off wildfires in Canada. Lightning strikes setting off wildfires in Canada. I mean, you just could not make that up, basically. So anyway, that's the squares and the oppositions. But the Sun and Mercury have yet to oppose Saturn. So that comes in later. And by the beginning of August, Sun will be exactly opposite Saturn. And that happens every year, of course, as the Sun makes its round. But because this year, as it is the case again all year, and last year it was the same, this year and next year it will be the same, we have Saturn very strong. And when the sun goes opposite Saturn in Cancer, which is again ordinarily a time to have some holiday and enjoy yourself and so on, it's just again having to deal with the opposition of Saturn and the strength of Saturn more than anything else. So this is one image I thought was useful to just again highlight this Saturn Mars and this kind of this sense of a heat dome. I mean, again, I thought this was so apt how you can have a heat dome, which I never heard of. And of course, how, you know, the atmosphere works, and it sends this the pressure down. Saturn is the pressure and creating this heat, and obviously like record-breaking heat wave in Canada and different places. So anyway, like I said, it was always going to be this hot. It was always going to be this, whether it was literally the case, you know, or just figuratively for yourself. This is how it's expressing it. But thankfully now this is breaking up. Now the result. Okay, so this is the image I used from Pandemonium. You know, it's the epic poem by John Milton. So it's I just think apt in terms of like looking at scenes on the news with fires breaking out, wildfires everywhere, and that one in the Gulf of Mexico, and it was like somebody posted on social media, like it was like opening the doors to hell, like the Hades, with this kind of like big fire on the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. But anyway, I think it's reached this peak in many ways, but now we have this to deal with. And this is Mars debilitation, and it occurs exactly by June 17th. So it's almost like, you know, just after the explosion, after the fires, after the blowout, after whatever, there's that sense of weakness of Mars. And this is just something to be mindful of towards the middle of the month, because the middle of the month then is quite volatile for other reasons, which I'll explain when I go through the month day by day. But Mars debilitated generally is just, we don't feel, you know, and this is for anybody, not just Mars ruled people, Aries and Scorpio, it's for everybody. We all have Mars, we all have will. And when it's weak, our willpower is like out the window. It's shut. So you might be doing that thing that you know you shouldn't be doing, or you cannot do the thing that you know you should be doing, and or you're aiming for something and you don't know what you're aiming for. Like Mars in Cancer is a bit aimless, really. It's like the image of Cancer and the flowing rivers of Cancer and meandering here and there like a river flows down a mountain. And even the fact that we talk about a river flowing down a mountain, and Mars's nature is not to flow down a mountain. Mars is to get from A to B in a straight line and go up the mountain to get to the top. So it's like they're completely opposite in their nature, Mars and Cancer. Just don't work together at all. So this image I just saw, if you put this in reverse, like, yeah, getting to the top of the mountain is great, but it's like, wait a minute. It's like everything feels a bit upside down. And where am I going anyway? And what am I doing? That's the kind of thing with Mars debilitated. So just talk about the lunar phases for the month before I get into the chart. And of course, we're having a new moon. The moon is waning on top of all of that, with Mars moving into its weakest place. So we'll just be mindful of the moon waning during this period into Gemini, and the end of Gemini, where we have this lunar mansion, the one called Purnavasu, the return of the light. And this is what I call the truthful one. And it's all about finding truth. It's all about finding a pattern, joining the dots, you know. And so this new moon might suggest, therefore, that this new lunar month coming up from the 10th of July might be a time where we might gain some insight into something, some pattern. I'm not going to read any more into that. You can read into that what you will. But basically, there could be something we find out about, we discover something, some pattern that we or somebody and everybody, therefore, figures out. Then the full moon, the culmination point in the middle of the month, and the full moon is in Capricorn. And it's in the sign Uttarashada, the ladder victorious. I call it the responsible one in Capricorn, the beginning of Capricorn. You know, it's in Saturn's sign, where Saturn is very powerful at the moment. It's associated with the sun. So there's a real need to negotiate for this full moon, and subsequently the Sun-Saturn dynamic, which again, like I said, by the beginning of August, but leading up to then through the end of August, is this Sun-Saturn coming into an opposition. And so we have to kind of negotiate our resources and all of that. That's the Sun with Saturn. But we're probably going to see this in many other ways as well, where we're kind of having to kind of the government saying, okay, stick it out a bit longer and we're going to get through this. That's one expression of this ladder victorious. It's like keep at it and you'll get there. That's going to be the kind of theme of this full moon, I imagine. So it's this kind of thing, but there might also be a kickback and resistance to that when you have Saturn Sun opposition, because it's always like this government against the people, that kind of thing. So let me just bring up the chart for now. I hope you can see that okay. And I'm going to bring the time space bar up, and we're going to go through the month day by day. So I have it here on the 1st, just to show you, obviously this is a past now, just to show the exact Mars-Saturn opposition at 18 degrees. And then moving up forward day by day, we're here on the 4th already. So Mars now is at 20 degrees, so it's moving past this conjunction. Now, the thing is that actually this has some good indications, because Saturn aspecting Mars is actually a cancellation, what they call, of debilitation, or Nichabanga. I don't like calling it cancellation of debilitation, but more a mitigation of debilitation, because I don't need to, convince you that that Mars energy is not great right now. It's really not great right now. But it is thankfully mitigated by Saturn somewhat. So it's contained somewhat, in other words. So in relation to things like your energy or your willpower, whatever it is, it's like you just don't maybe have the energy to do that thing that maybe if you did, you would regret it. Like, put it that way. Saturn puts the restraint on, and that's sometimes a good thing, so that you don't overdo it. So that's the mitigating factor here. And I think that can be really helpful during this whole Mars leading up to its debilitation later on in a couple of weeks. One other thing I wanted to point out as well before we go through the month is, and another reason I believe that actually this month is as volatile as it is, but also last month, is because in June and July, you might notice here a lineup for those who follow it very closely. When you have planets either in the beginning of the movable signs, the first pada or the first 3 degree 20 minutes, the middle of the fixed signs, which is 13 degrees 20 to 1640, or the very end of a jewel sign, so the last 3 degrees 20 minutes of the jewel signs, these are what are known as Virgatama. So they are basically when a planet is in the very beginning of the movable signs, it's in the same 9th division. So it doubles up that same energy, the same sign. So Rahu and Ketu are both Virgatama. They're both in the same sign in the 9th division. The underlying strength is there too. So what do you get? You basically get a doubling up of Rahu and Ketu right now. And that's been the case in June, and it's the case in July until the beginning of August, where they move out. So Rahu is in Taurus in both charts, Ketu and Scorpio in both charts, and we're getting a real sense of, on top of the fact that Mars and Venus, which rule Rahu and Ketu, are together as well, opposite Saturn and Pluto. I mean, it's just all come to a head basically now. And then you put them in a square to Uranus, and then you get this kind of like lightning trigger for like a wildfire or whatever it is. So anyway, that's another thing I wanted to point out. Anyway, so let's move it forward day by day, and we can see how this is going to pan out. Let's go to the new moon on the 10th, first of all. And you can see here that the new moon, it's at the end of Gemini, 23 degrees. And I think this is also, heralding something new as well, because it's not only, and you might have listened to the sign forecast for the month where I talked about the new moon and full moon more, but the new moon in general, this, especially because Mercury is strong, it's in its own sign, it's returned here and moving out of its shadow now, and it's a new moon. There's a sense of new beginnings, I think, this month for sure. In whatever way that might be expressed in your life, I don't know, but that is what's happening. There's a new beginning and a sense of something new coming in, new clarity. Planning ahead is always the case with Mercury. As it passes its shadow, it's moving forward now, and that would be the case moving forward. We're going to start to plan ahead now, and I don't think that's been the case for a while. So that's something good to think about. Yes, the whole theme of the month is all of the slower moving planets are all retrograde, and that means that the bigger picture plans are, and all these kind of Capricorn, Aquarius, bigger themes around society and work and all of these things and the economy and so on, are really slow right now and in reverse impact, and will on in some cases perhaps move, like in many places are moving out of restrictions, but many others are actually moving back in or slowly reassessing whether they can move out. And this is all to do with these retrogrades, Jupiter retrograding back to Capricorn, which occurs in the autumn. So there's this whole bigger picture here of things kind of going in reverse, while at the same time, opposite here, all the faster moving planets are going forward. And now Mercury is joining them, going forward and starting to clear something and plan ahead. So this is kind of two sides to this story of July here, basically. The moon joins Mars and Venus, where Mars and Venus now are very closely conjunct, as you can see here. And that can be, well, that can be passionate, that can be exciting, that can be, fun. But again, think about the image of Pan. It's again within the constraints or limitations, or with the doubts and fears of Pan hanging around in the background here. With this Saturn-Pluto combination. So whatever's going on, there's always going to be this thing hanging around, or at least, this year. So I'll move it forward more day by day. You can see here by mid-month, there are quite a few changes happening, and they are when Venus, Mars move through the juncture between Cancer and Leo. And you might have read about this before, this Gandant, this ending section here between Cancer and Leo. It's not as volatile as the Scorpio and Sagittarius, I don't believe, or as complex as the Pisces Aries. It is complex for sure, and the end of Cancer anyway is complex, but I don't think it's as complex. Having said that, it's still like a period where things might kind of be a bit shaky, let me put it that way. So by mid-month, because Mars is now exactly debilitated, and Venus has just moved in to Leo, and the Sun has just moved into Cancer, and the Moon is just about to move into Scorpio, as you can see here on the 20th, when Mars then also moves into Leo. This few days from mid-month into the last week is a bit volatile, to say the least. So we just need to be mindful of this. Now, Mars goes, this is something interesting, Mars goes from its weakest place on the 17th, in a few days, goes from its absolute debilitation and weakest place through this Gandant section into a very strong position in Leo. Now, it's going to take a while, a few days, to get into strength, but by the end of the month, it is a strong position. And not only that, it's the difference now between Mars opposite Saturn and all the restrictions, and Mars opposite Jupiter, and then it's like overly like abundant, like really eager and optimistic and lucky go-getter, whatever the phrase is. It's like it's full on and in a more positive way. So it's like going from one extreme to another really by the end of July in many ways. So you might feel like that is also needs to be managed, because up until now Mars is really weak, and all of a sudden it gets really strong and bolstered. It was weak and restricted, and now it's gone to really strong very quickly and bolstered. It's like a complete like seesaw effect. So obviously it's helpful to be mindful of this, so that when the energy does really crack open, that you're not going to go crazy or anything and create any issues there. And the issue, I guess, with Mars Jupiter as well as Venus Jupiter, you can see that they're opposite now as well, is an overdoing anything really. There's an overly optimistic stance when these planets oppose, and it's kind of overindulging and things like that. But it's still better than opposite Saturn, and that's the thing to think about. Now, like I said, Sun now starts its opposition to Saturn, so it's like the latest one, and then Mercury subsequently will oppose Saturn. So we have to be mindful of that. And because the Sun rules where Venus and Mars are, that's going to still pull that energy in. So it's still dealing with this kind of Pan figure in the background, kind of giving us a bit of like edginess always. So last thing I'll talk about here before I take questions is the full moon, and that occurs on the 24th. Sorry, let me go forward, 24th. So the 24th is full moon in Capricorn. It's in this sign Uttarashada. It's with Saturn and Pluto. And it's again the balancing point between these two extremes, the inner and outer, the outer being Capricorn, the inner being Cancer. You know, what we want in the more immediate time frame, what we would like, that's Cancer, versus what we need to do, which is Capricorn. And so there's obviously with the full moon in Capricorn every year, it's the case that we have to find a balance between these two, our inner and outer worlds, our, you know, home life and our outer responsibilities in the world. So home life and work life, of course, all of that, work-life balance, all of these things will be necessary during this full moon at the end of the month. But because there's so much more like exuberant and really, I guess, really over the top, maybe even energies going on with this Mars, Jupiter, and Venus, Jupiter, um, it's just overall a better setup by the last week of July in terms of these oppositions. But it's a month of oppositions. The whole month is set up with oppositions. Um, and then the last thing to say that Mercury then moves as well into Cancer by the 25th, and so finishes out the month with Mercury now moving into Cancer, opposite Pluto initially on the 25th, and then later on in August it will oppose Saturn, as will the Sun. So Mercury, in a sense, really doesn't do as well in Cancer for obvious reasons, because it's not rational or analytical, and it gets too emotional to be able to communicate very effectively. But it is a good time to be able to communicate what you're feeling, you know, to join head and heart and to express or try to express how you're feeling. And because of Saturn's opposition to Mercury, you know, that might actually help, you know, to deal with, you know, being more objective about how you're feeling and to express that more clearly and in a more detached way. So that's the month of July. It's a real month of contrast, of opposition, of volatility, of energy fluctuations in it, like off the chart kind of way, with Mars going from one extreme to another and back again. And by the way, right now, as I speak, it's July 4th. And from, if I just bring up the chart for right now, July 4th, Mars here at 20 degrees is actually the Capricorn division of Cancer. So for the next few days until the 8th, Mars is actually in the 9th division of Capricorn. And so there's a real underlying strength to Mars actually in the next few days. So it's this kind of up and down with Mars. You know, the fact that it's weak, yes, but at the same time, it's mitigated by Saturn. It's in Capricorn right now. It finishes in Cancer by the 17th, but then it immediately goes into strength in Leo, opposite Jupiter. So it's a real kind of seesaw effect of energy all month. So just to be mindful of that, I would say. Okay, so that's my take on July. For anyone that's here live, I'll take questions now. And for everybody else watching back, I wish you all the very best for the month of July, and I'll see you next time.